so I decided to head on down to the San Antonio Zoo today, partly because I hadn't been in a while and they have had a lot of recent renovations made to the park. I also wanted to see how many animals that I could find that I had also faced off against in Black Myth Wukong. To be honest, it wasn't a lot, but I did still have a fun time. I really like this zoo. I think the animals are generally well taken care for with large open habitats, and while it was very busy, today is a Saturday, it was very easy to navigate with all the new renovations and pathways. Being already familiar with the zoo, this wasn't necessarily a big issue. And while there were a few Black Myth Wukong related animals, looking at you, Tiger Vanguard, there were definitely a ton of monkeys. And now, without further ado, let's take a look at Black Myth Wukong. I've completed the game in around 60 hours, and here are my thoughts. Black Myth Wukong is a third-person action-adventure game from Chinese developer Game Science and released in 2024. I loved this game, and it was one that I was highly anticipating, having seen the reveal gameplay trailer over 4 years ago, seeing the fight against the giant wolf and being mesmerized by the language of the art. Fluid is one word that I would describe this game, and it's pretty easy to see without even describing it. The world, characters, and animation have such incredible detail that the action genuinely flows, almost becoming rhythmic with the use of the main weapon, the bow staff, along with the many spells and abilities you gain throughout the game. On PlayStation, you use square to hit light attacks, and triangle to launch heavy attacks, which can be held down as you gain essence, allowing for a more powerful heavy attack in whichever form you're currently using. You can choose to upgrade up to 3 staff stances in the game, including Smash Stance, Pillar Stance, and Thrust Stance. I mainly played with the Smash Stance as I felt it best suited my personal gameplay style. I was super into this system though, and actually liked how the team limited the player to just one main weapon. I think this is a good chosen gameplay focus, along with being a narrative focus, as the bow staff was what the legendary Sun Wukong used in battle ages ago, so it only makes sense as you're essentially following in his footsteps. And that brings me to the next important thing I took from this game, and that's the story. Black Myth Wukong is directly inspired by the classic Chinese novel Journey to the West, a Chinese mythology story. In the game, you play as a monkey, the Destined One, a descendant of the great monkey Buddha Sun Wukong. You are tasked with collecting 6 relics across the lands, with the hope that one day you may resurrect Sun Wukong. On the way, you are challenged by many menacing foes and difficult boss encounters, seeking to halt your progress. I gotta be honest here, I had no idea about this story prior to jumping into the game. After playing, though, I'm certainly now more interested to seek out the novel for potentially additional characters and maybe some deeper lore. The story in the game overall, though, is broken up into several chunks of chapters, each with sprawling maps and dazzling landscapes. Each chapter therefore corresponds to a different relic, so seeing how each one is intertwined with the themes of that chapter was very interesting to experience. I could definitely feel the progression of the story overall from one to the next. I did, however, have a slight issue with the pacing. When a chapter begins, it sort of just starts in that new area of the new chapter you're in. This often felt awkward as the actual transitioning between chapters felt a little rushed, like almost something was missing. Despite that, when you get into the meat of the story and encounter the main boss fights, the vibes often exceeded my expectations. I enjoyed all of the side characters, You meet several throughout your journey, but there's one that sticks around longer than the others, a transformed pig named Zubaji, who is my favorite. I enjoyed playing as the protagonist as well. I thought playing as a monkey was extremely fun. This game has scale. It is huge, and not just the open zones between each chapter, and yes, essentially they are zones. This isn't an open world game, but also between the length overall of the game and the amount of different kinds of enemies you encounter. I loved whenever they threw in a giant monster or a massive god and or beast in the background. And I love how the camera is treated in this game. You have, of course, full control with the right stick, but often in moments where, say, you might launch a supercharged heavy attack, or if the enemy you're fighting goes in for a larger area of effect attack, the camera will sort of cinematically move in a certain direction or grow larger. And I also think that's another great word to describe this game: cinematic. Everything you do really starts to feel larger than life, especially once you get into the later chapters, which I won't spoil here. That's combined with the fluidity of combat and the incredible music and soundtrack. The music in the game has a lot of variety, but I think the main theme encapsulates a lot of energy that's felt throughout the game. It's grandiose, yet has moments of respite, calm interstitials before launching into an epic orchestral finale with some of the coolest sounding horns that I've heard put into a video game score. There's also a ton of secrets and secret areas to find throughout the whole game, and I managed to find just about all of them. It was really cool to stumble upon some of these, often culminating in a hair-splittingly intense side boss battle that always led to some sort of rare treasure or upgrade item once defeated. My most positive thoughts of this game are often also the most positive whenever I played other difficult character action games or games within the Dark Souls franchise, to be more specific, and that's the feeling I get after defeating a boss. Multiply that if it's a boss I've been struggling with. The specific sense of accomplishment and satisfaction is why I love the Dark Souls series in the first place. Going back in time, my first one was the first Dark Souls, released in 2011, where I played on Xbox 360. I remember hearing about this game and that would be similar to a game that came out on PS3, Demon's Souls, and developed by the same studio, From Software. I didn't have a PS3, but I can sure recall showing my friends the Demon's Souls trailer with the Dragon God and losing it at just how cool it looked. And then the Bartholomew trailer for Dark Souls dropped, and it's still, in my opinion, one of the best trailers ever made. It was complete with one of the greatest invitations I've ever had the pleasure to pursue: prepare to die. Oh wow, was I not prepared. This kind of game was entirely new to me, like many other players playing for the first time. The series is known for being brutally difficult, and you may think that just for the combat, and this is true, but it's also difficult in terms of reading what the game is trying to tell you. There's little to no hand-holding in any of these games, so normally it's up to the player to recognize and understand where to go and what to do. I played this game for 3 days, one whole weekend, and I got to the Taurus Demon and said, nope, I'm done. And I gave up. It was one of the first times where I had straight up just abandoned a game for perceiving it as too difficult. So I moved on. I played other games like Batman Arkham City, Skyrim, and others around the end of 2011. And then sometime months later into the spring, I randomly decided to return to Dark Souls. There was this feeling, slowly eating a tiny piece of me, that I somehow needed to return. I had to defeat the Taurus Demon to prove it to myself that I could. This accomplishment was like a lightning bolt, ignited in me like no other video game experience had before. I went on to consume this game, its weapons, the armor, the lore. I took down the Bell Gargoyles, Moonlight Butterfly, the Capra Demon, Quelaag, Great Grey Wolf, Sif, Ornstein and Smo, Seath the Scaleless, all the way to Gwyn. I also ended up devouring its subsequent sequels and spin-offs such as Sekiro and Bloodborne. I'm very happy to say that this sensation and thrill to my gaming core was met and achieved with Black Myth Wukong. I felt many of the same feelings as I did fighting bosses throughout the Souls series as I did here, so that's just one of my biggest personal congratulations to this game. A Souls-inspired game, then, is one taking elements from the series created by From Software and machining it into your own video game. Usually this means the game might incorporate things like bonfires, things that act like save points, where they are spread out at choice locations throughout the map, sometimes after defeating the boss, that allow you to recover health and stamina, level up your stats, and upgrade your weapons. The difficulty of reading the world and lore through item descriptions as opposed to more large narrative story beats or cutscenes is also a common mechanic found in many Souls-inspired games. The threads between all of them are pretty clear to see nowadays. These are some things that made a lot of people label Black Myth Wukong Souls-like, and I think that's partially correct. At the end of the day, Black Myth Wukong is a third-person character action game. It incorporates some things from the Souls series, but really just does everything in its own way. There are commonalities like the bonfire, which here is replaced with a shrine. and there are many tough, challenging enemies and boss fights. I think Black Myth Wukong attempts and succeeds at making something different, as with the story, it's fully voiced with cutscenes and amazing animated shorts mixed in between the chapters. The upgrade systems are also dissimilar from Souls-adjacent video games. The skill trees are entirely unique, giving you options to focus points more into general stats, stamina, etc. boosts, the multiple staff stances, and the spells and transformations. I think the transformations are very fun to pull off. They're a little slower, flashy, and exciting to see, and deal a decent amount of damage. This game is not without its flaws though, as I ran into more than a few graphical glitches, light loading strangely, and shimmering. Sometimes I did feel in combat that some deaths or mistakes were not entirely my fault. It seemed to be either the fault of the environment, or other times my button input just wouldn't complete an attack. These are minor nitpicks though, in an otherwise fantastic experience. Overall, I found this game to be so much fun. It was truly a joy learning about this new story, with this new strange cast of animal characters in an unfamiliar world. The combat and gameplay rocked, just awesome all around. The developer of Black Myth Wukong, Game Science, is now one that I am hotly anticipating for whenever they announce their next project. Those are my thoughts on Black Myth Wukong. Thank you again for joining me on Ryan's Game Quest. I appreciate you. Take care.